And welcome back to Sound Off. This is Jaime Umphenour in the KPRL Sound Off studios. And we are so happy to have joining us once again Mark Mix, and he is the president of the National Right to Work Committee. And he also serves as the president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Fund. Welcome back to Sound Off, Mark. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jamie. Thanks for the opportunity to come back and chat with you about no lack of news in the country, that's for sure.
Holy smokes. It has been, we can't even keep up with it today. It has been like a wild day. Before we get into the news of the day and the week, share with us briefly what the National Right to Work Committee is.
Yeah, Jamie, it's real simple, and we've been around since 1955, and our primary mission is to protect the rights of individual employees against forced unionism. Going all the way back to the 1930s during the Roosevelt administration, the federal government came up with this brilliant idea that they thought that union officials in America should have the power to force workers into unions and then, to add insult to injury, force them to pay dues or fees in order to keep their jobs. And so since 1937, when the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of this amazing power grab by union officials and by the Roosevelt administration after they were threatened with a court packing. You know how history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Yes.
They tried to pack the court back then. And so from 1937 till today, the federal government has allowed union officials to have workers fired if they don't tender dues or fees. And in the meantime, after they realized the damage that had done across the country, they allowed the states, interestingly enough, the ability to pass what are now known as right-to-work laws, and that privilege was granted to the states back in 1947 with the passage of the Taft-Hartley Act. And so since that time, 27 states have basically outlawed or overruled this federal statute that allows union officials to have workers fired. Those are known as right-to-work states. We passed 5 new right-to-work laws in the last 9 years, including in Michigan and Indiana, Wisconsin, West Virginia, and Kentucky. But California is one of those states where the federal law still prevails, and workers in California in the private sector can be fired from their jobs if they don't support financially a labor union that has the exclusive voice in their workplace. And so that's been the mission of the Right to Work Committee. In the meantime, we set up the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation in 1968, and the foundation's mission is to provide free legal aid to individual employees whose rights have been violated. And in the course of that time frame, since 1968, we've been to the United States Supreme Court on 18 occasions arguing for individual employee rights and won some very substantial precedents that protect workers' rights in both the private sector and in the public sector. A couple of those cases have come from California. A big case, class action lawsuit, we were representing over 45,000 California state employees in a case called Knox versus SEIU, which basically gave non-union members the ability to get out of the special assessments that the union were using to take on Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger way back in 2005. The case made it to the Supreme Court in 2012, and we won some rights for California workers and workers across the country not to be assessed special assessments for political causes, which the union wants to fight. So it's been a long journey, but there's still work to be done, and the basic mission is individual worker freedom in America's workplace.
And since we have the new administration that's been in power for almost a year now, they are very pro-union, very much in bed with the union. And this is becoming quite the problem.
Yeah, Jamie. And, everyone is pro-union. We're pro-voluntary unions here at the National Right to Work Committee. What Joe Biden and the administration and the other bureaucrats in his administration that they've nominated and confirmed and have working for them, they're in favor of more forced unionism. Mm-hmm. They want to wipe out all 27 right-to-work laws across the country. In fact, the president has made that one of his primary objectives, supporting a bill that's already passed the House of Representatives that would reimpose this federal power on those 27 states that have passed right-to-work laws and say, you know what, we're not going to let you have that privilege anymore, so we're just going to repeal it and go back to the federal authorization. So Biden's in favor of forced unionism as opposed to voluntary unionism. He talks about being the most pro-union president in American history. Well, what he is probably the most pro-forced unionism president in American history, and his policies basically support that notion.
Yes, and I think I want to say he's even commented on trying to get all of the Amazon employees, like these new big companies, trying to force those employees into unionizing. Very dangerous, very, very dangerous. And the White House does not have a good record right now. Let's talk a little bit about jobs, Mark, because we've had in October and November, almost 9 million people quit their jobs. And the White House is trying to say, well, this is the best jobs report we've ever had. And it's like, no, dude, this is people who have either quit because of, unreal policies of the workplace or insane workplaces, or they're being forced out for other reasons, or they're just like, I'm done. Like all this COVID nonsense, done. What's the truth about what's going on with jobs?
Yeah, Jamie, I think your chemistry is right. I think there's components of all of that in the economic news that we're getting. President Biden touted the 3.9% unemployment rate as, the best in history. And the fact is the workforce participation rate is lower now than it was before COVID started. And, if you're going to lock down small businesses and you're going to pick winners and losers as to who's essential and who can keep people employed or who has to shut down, you're going to do tremendous damage to the economy. And we have not come back from where we were at the beginning of the COVID situation back in 2020. And so this idea that touting that the economy's never been better is really just a bunch of malarkey, to use his words. He likes to use that word. It kind of sounds pretty good. Malarkey's one of those old-fashioned words that means it's not true. It's malarkey. And so what he's talking about economically is this. The notion that the federal government's control over the American economy has grown, that's probably true. The notion that they're trying everything possible to basically inflate the economy with government spending is true. But most of that stuff's temporary. If the guy was really about jobs and increasing economic activity and economic opportunity, he wouldn't have had all these union members laid off with the cancellation of the Keystone Pipeline, which was a union-only project. Mm-hmm. And then he would have said that we're going to continue to explore for energy on federal lands and allow leases to explore. But he did shut all that down. A lot of those workers were rank-and-file union members. So, one side of his mouth says one thing, and the actions of the administration is totally another. And really, frankly, you have to believe what you see, not what you hear.
Exactly. It's kind of like, like those old street hustlers, and they have like the little cups and balls, and they're trying to shifting. That's what it's like every single day. It feels like, especially from Little Miss Peppermint Patty. It's just nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see. And that we're in a weird state with labor. And I know somebody will probably knock me for this, but I had a Starbucks gift card. And my daughter and I, we said, let's go get a cup of coffee. It was like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon the other day. 4 Starbucks were shut down at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They don't have people working. They don't have enough staff. It took 4 different Starbucks to be able to use a gift card. That's a problem. And can we blame that all on sicknesses?
No, Jamie. This is the economy that we're facing, and anyone who drives down a main street of a small town or a medium-sized city sees exactly what you just saw, and that is help wanted, help wanted, help wanted. And one of the results of what's happened in government intervention over the last 2 years has been when you pay people not to work, and you actually pay them to stay home, you create a disincentive for those folks to go out there and try to work for themselves and make themselves better and take advantage of opportunities. And what you did during that whole process is penalize small businesses, as I said, picking winners and losers about who could stay open and who couldn't, and basically said to people, we're going to pay you not to work, and we're going to pump more government money into the economy, and we're going to disincentivize work efforts. And that what we're seeing now is a result of that. And, of course, Joe Biden said it's all good and fair because now it's a workers' market. They can choose what they want to do, and wages are increasing. But, boy, oh, boy, wages aren't increasing nearly as fast as the 7% inflation that we saw at the end of last year through 2021. And you see it at the grocery store, you see it at the gas pump, you see it everywhere. And the one thing that they're taking credit for all this, and it doesn't make any sense because the cost of living's increased dramatically and the problems are real. And we're seeing it back here in Virginia as well, Jamie. Small diners that have been open 24 hours that say, we got to close at 3 because no one wants to work. No one wants to come into work. And boy, it is a mess. And again, it's not what you hear, it's what you see. And what you're seeing is one of the problems right now in the economy.
It was a little bit mind-blowing. I just have to be honest. And I have a pretty simple life, so you don't go out to dinner a whole lot and things. But I was like, okay, let's go get a cup of coffee. That sounds like a nice little treat. Absolutely mind-blowing. And it makes you wonder, as businesses are being told, oh, you got to shut down, schools shut down because, we have this surge. That's going to start hitting pocketbooks again, because what do all these parents do if their kids are now home again? Are we going to see more incentives financially from the government to stay home?
Yeah, that's exactly what you're going to see. In fact, they're already talking about more stimulus and more relief, quote, and I'm using my finger quotes here, relief and stimulus. They're talking about that. The average daycare cost across the United States is, I think, $1,057 a month. I mean, when you start shutting things down and you force parents to make decisions about, what they do with their children if they're going to be out of school, whether they stay home and use their vacation time or comp time or whatever it is, the time they can muster to stay home to take care of their kids, or, go to a daycare that is going to cost them money. I mean, these are real issues. They're everyday issues that are happening. And, it's not just in the service sector, Jamie. It's in the manufacturing and the retail businesses with the supply chain. Another situation that's been created and basically fostered and made worse by governmental policy. And better than anyone else in California what legislation has done to the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. And we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
If you want to go that direction.
Yes, and we're going to take our commercial break, and we can talk about that. And also what happened today at the Supreme Court. 1 out of 2 ain't bad. Let's just put it that way as far as rulings go. And how will that affect workers as well? So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back with Mark Mix of the National Right to Work Committee. And welcome back to the final segment of Sound Off today. And we are chatting with Mark Mix of the National Right to Work Committee. And we're talking about jobs and unions and the government. Oh, how they would love to send out more stimulus money because of the fear, air quotes, that they have created. Because the pandemic, my God, it's almost over. Everybody's going to have herd immunity. But, they're messing with our economy. And we were talking about the ports here in California are still a mess. There's still delays. Amazon Prime, some things are taking like 2 weeks to come, and that's not normal for Amazon Prime. So where do we go from here?
Well, Jamie, what I really want to talk about is the Tamale Festival this weekend. That sounds really, really good.
It's awesome.
I probably won't make it to California for the Tamale Festival, but as much as I'd like to. But maybe there won't be tamales won't be available if they're coming in by container to the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, because there's about 105 ships now sitting outside, not only at Anchorage outside the port, but also at that environmental safe zone out 50 miles out, where these ships must stay in motion, and so they can't be counted as, quote, not ready to be unloaded or loaded or whatever, but yet the transportation secretary was out there claiming victory and mission accomplished. And the Biden administration back in October talked about how they solved the problem by sitting down with the stakeholders, and Jen Psaki asking answering the questions about this, saying that everything was fine and has all been solved. But yet when you go to the grocery store and you go to the hardware store and you go to the retail store and you see empty shelves, nothing's been solved. And, 40% of all the imports in the United States come through those two ports in Los Angeles. And right now, Jamie, we're in the midst of a renegotiation of the union contract for all 29 ports along the West Coast. And, one of the things that's happened like clockwork in every one of these renegotiations is there's been slowdowns and problems have been raised that help negotiating position on either side of the table when it comes to negotiating a union contract. But yet the Biden administration, they talk about their infrastructure bill, their bipartisan infrastructure bill that has money for the ports. The Secretary of Transportation was talking about that. But guess what? None of the money can be used for automation or making the ports more efficient. That's because they're kowtowing to the union officials. And, when you think about AB 5 and the law that passed in the California General Assembly about independent contractors, we think of that being kind of Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. Well, go talk to an owner-operator truck driver that was working at those ports that has a truck that's older than 2011, and or because they're not an employee of a motor carrier, they can't work at the ports anymore. One of the reasons why you change the definition of an employee from independent contractor to employee is so they can be unionized, Jamie. You can't unionize independent owner-operators or independent contractors like Lyft drivers or Uber drivers unless you change the law and redefine them as employees. That's what AB 5 did. And also the kind of environmental regulations that have been set up at the ports, banning trucks older than 2011, took about 70% of the capacity of the trucks that were being used at the ports, loading, unloading, moving those containers to either warehouses or intermodal transportation heads. That's all out now, and people are not working there. So there's governmental intervention that's causing the problem at the supply chain.
Oh, they have intervened in every which way. And coincidentally, the author of AB 5 has quit her job as a legislator to work for the unions. Isn't that just so weird?
I did not know that, Jamie. I did not know that. Thank you. That's an interesting bit of information.
Oh, yes.
Not surprising, however.
Not at all. Not at all. We have about a minute left before we have to go. What are your thoughts of the Supreme Court ruling today on the vax mandates in the businesses?
Yeah, if you get a chance to read the decision, and I haven't read it, but one of our attorneys did, and said it was a really kind of a tour de force about federalism, about states' rights and the enumerated powers of the federal government, which is a breath of fresh air if it's what I think it is. And the 6-3 majority on the mandate side of it, they sent it back to the Sixth Circuit, but they basically said, here's what you need to be doing and what you need to be thinking, because we're going to basically decide it this way. The CMS part of it, though, the saying that any healthcare provider that accepts Medicare and Medicaid money is going to have to impose the mandate, that's really kind of troubling, because
yes.
I don't think there's many hospital systems left in the country that don't take Medicare or Medicaid patients. And if they do, they may have to adhere. And that was Kavanaugh and Roberts who sided with the other 3 justices to basically keep that in place. And Jamie, the story there is if you accept the drugs free from the drug dealer and you get addicted to it, you're going to have to pay for it later on. And that's what's happened with the government intervention in healthcare.
Not surprised about Roberts on that part, but Kavanaugh, I am a little bit surprised about that. And that's very worrisome about the healthcare side of it, very positive on the business side of it and the OSHA side of it. So maybe we'll get something right here in this country. We have a lot of work to do. But Mark, where can folks find out more about your organization and the work that you do?
Yeah, Jamie, they can find us on that amazing internet at www.nrtw.org for the foundation, nrtwc.org for the committee's work.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mark. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right, Jamie, and go to the Tamale Festival.
Oh, I will. I love tamales. It's my thing. Atascadero kind of rocks it in that department. So thanks, Mark.